There's nothing quite like watching someone strap two sticks to their feet, stare at a mountain, and whisper, "I'm built different." Winter doesn't humble people gently. It just waits for them to accelerate. And trust me, it gets much worse from here. 1. A vacationing finance bro marching toward a black diamond slope with the swagger of someone who once did a ski lesson at age 9 is a rare kind of optimism. And this particular specimen elevated it to performance art when he insisted the mountain was mostly psychological. He hyped himself up so loudly that strangers started filming before he even put on his helmet, which, naturally, he refused to buckle because it ruins the jawline. He pushed off with the confidence of a man expecting applause, only to immediately achieve a speed normally reserved for space capsules. His skis vibrated like they were considering legal separation, and every muscle in his body negotiated a different survival strategy. Halfway down, he attempted a turn so wide it threatened the neighboring zip code and ended up sliding sideways in the world's least graceful snow pirouette. When he finally stopped, buried halfway into a soft snowbank, he announced he meant to do that, as if the mountain had volunteered to participate in his ego protection program. 2. A tourist wrapped in designer winter gear like a refrigerated fashion display decided that ski patrol signage was beneath him and announced he would take a shortcut through an ungroomed forest path because his smartwatch suggested an alternate route. What followed was a masterclass in overestimating both technology and quadriceps. The moment he entered the trees, gravity reclaimed all previously rented confidence, sending him lurching downhill like a runaway shopping cart filled with bad decisions. His skis caught every root, bump, and philosophical obstacle imaginable as he ricocheted between saplings with the sound of someone repeatedly losing a polite argument. He emerged at the bottom covered in snow, pine needles, and the quiet terror of a man who realized nature had written a performance review. His smartwatch proudly buzzed to inform him he had set a new personal speed record, which may be the most generous participation trophy ever awarded by a piece of electronics. 3. A man with the posture of someone who learned everything from inspirational sports movies stepped up to a beginner slope and declared it too easy, which instantly cursed whatever came next. Ignoring instructors, boundaries, and basic geometry, he marched over to an intermediate hill while announcing that talent just needs the right motivation. The hill answered by reminding him motivation does not affect gravity's policies. He launched himself downward with a grin so wide it implied contractual confidence, only for that grin to evaporate the instant his skis began drifting apart like two coworkers avoiding conflict. He flailed heroically, performing a full series of accidental aerial gestures that looked like a malfunctioning, wacky inflatable tube man auditioning for a winter commercial. By the time he slid to a halt, face down and dramatically winded, he insisted he had tested the limits on purpose, as though the mountain had invited him to beta test physics. 4. A weekend adventurer with the athletic build of someone who frequently buys gym memberships but seldom uses them claimed he could totally ski backwards, citing zero evidence besides vague childhood memories. He spun around at the top of the slope with theatrical confidence, ready to perform a move usually reserved for trained athletes and movie stunt doubles. His backward descent began surprisingly smoothly for approximately 3 seconds. Then reality tapped him politely on the shoulder. With no sense of direction and even less balance, he drifted sideways like a confused refrigerator being pushed across ice. His skis crossed, uncrossed, recrossed, and eventually committed to a codependent collapse. He toppled gently but completely, sliding on his jacket like a runaway curling stone. When he finally stopped, he announced he had proved the concept, which, translated, meant he had survived the demonstration without lodging himself in a snow fence. 5. A self-declared adrenaline enthusiast decided to impress a date by attempting a jump built for people who understand the difference between confidence and aerodynamic plausibility. He approached the ramp with a pep talk loud enough to vibrate nearby lift towers, announcing he would nail this on the first try because he'd once watched a tutorial online. His ascent up the ramp began heroically and ended like a physics lecture on what not to do. Instead of launching gracefully, he achieved a spectacular flapping motion, as though trying to negotiate with the air through interpretive dance. His trajectory resembled a startled penguin attempting flight, ambitious, earnest, and profoundly misinformed. He landed in a puff of powder that politely cushioned his dignity, though not enough to prevent his date from quietly recommending hot chocolate instead of further athletic displays. 6. A corporate retreat participant fueled by team-building enthusiasm decided the best way to demonstrate leadership was to race his manager down an icy slope. He crouched into a form best described as experimental. Leaning so far forward, he looked like he was auditioning as a human javelin. The moment he pushed off, he accelerated with the unstoppable momentum of a shopping cart shot from a cannon. His manager, wisely opting for survival over competition, stayed behind while the aspiring speed champion rocketed downhill with the panicked rigidity of a statue being launched from a trebuchet. His attempt to brake turned into a full-body vibration festival, and he skidded sideways until a forgiving pile of snow adopted him. Emerging breathless, he declared it a strategic retreat, while his co-workers silently updated their internal ranking of people least likely to survive a mild breeze. 7. A college sophomore on winter break decided to prove to his cousins that he still had it, despite never having possessed whatever it was. He rode the ski lift bragging about his athletic instincts, only to dismount with the grace of a coat rack tipping over. Undeterred, he headed straight for an intermediate trail as if confidence conveyed legal permission. His first turn was a triumph of accidental success. His second was a polite suggestion. His third was a written resignation letter to balance itself. Within moments, he was barreling downhill with the posture of someone trying to flee his own legs. He eventually slid to rest against a snowbank, blinking at the sky like it had personally betrayed him. He insisted the conditions were off, though the conditions had remained perfectly still while he careened through an anthology of preventable errors. 8. A vacationing lawyer eager to decompress decided he could visualize the perfect run, apparently believing winter obeys manifesting. He stood at the top of the slope, closed his eyes, inhaled dramatically, and pushed off with the calmness of a man expecting enlightenment. What he received instead was a crash course in humility. His skis immediately drifted apart like two acquaintances at a reunion who promised to keep in touch but absolutely will not. He wobbled, rebalanced, lost balance again, and committed fully to a downhill scramble that made the snow itself look uncomfortable. His attempt to regain control involved frantic arm movements usually reserved for air traffic controllers in emergencies. When he finally stopped, he declared his meditative focus was slightly off, as though his primary obstacle had been a lapse in spiritual alignment rather than complete ignorance of edge control. 9. A self-appointed outdoors influencer insisted on filming a live tutorial while skiing, which is how a beginner slope became the stage for a man attempting to narrate his own downfall. He turned on the camera, delivered a confident introduction, and began explaining carving technique while absolutely not carving anything. His skis pointed in every direction except the one he described. The moment he gestured dramatically toward the horizon, mid-slope, mid-motion, he aligned his balance with the chaotic energy of a freshly opened folding chair. He toppled, slid, spun, and maintained his commitment to narrating until a snow mound gently muted the audio by absorbing him. Later, he uploaded the footage anyway, claiming it showcased the reality of progression, which is a charitable way of describing an instructional video that teaches nothing except how not to multitask. 10. A father eager to impress his children decided to demonstrate proper skiing form, even though he had spent most of the morning avoiding minor inclines like they were tax audits. Summoning paternal bravado, he declared he would show them a pro technique and launched himself down the hill. His first few seconds were surprisingly stable, prompting him to glance back for approval, an early tactical error. The moment he turned his head, his skis declared independence from one another, and his center of gravity filed for immediate emancipation. His arms flailed in slow-motion panic as his momentum carried him into an unplanned diagonal cruise across the entire width of the slope, scattering beginners like startled birds. When he finally rolled gently into a drift, his kids applauded what they assumed was a goofy performance, while he nodded solemnly as though the entire disaster had been a teaching tool. 11. A gym-obsessed weekend warrior decided that skiing was basically leg day with scenery, dismissing technique as an optional accessory. With muscles flexed and ego warmed up, he dropped into a powder run like he was approaching a squat rack. Gravity, unimpressed by his dedication to protein shakes, responded by accelerating him to a velocity incompatible with his understanding of knees. His attempt at a turn involved brute force rather than finesse, causing his skis to dig into the snow like they were rejecting his leadership. He lurched sideways, performing what resembled a surprise trust fall into the landscape, and slid until friction reintroduced itself. Rising slowly, he declared that the snow was heavier than expected, which is apparently the winter sports equivalent of blaming the barbell. 12. A newlywed husband hoping to impress his spouse declared he would lead the way down a scenic route, despite misreading the trail map with the confidence of a man who believes color coding is a suggestion. Believing he had selected a gentle run, he pushed forward into terrain that resembled an Olympic qualifying course. His face transitioned from triumph to existential revelation as the slope steepened. His descent became a desperate negotiation with every possible force acting on his body, and he executed turns that looked like he had seen diagrams of skiing but never attempted one. His spouse watched from above as he zigzagged in wildly unpredictable patterns, eventually slowing only because the slope itself relented. When she reached him, he claimed the map had been misprinted, a bold accusation toward an inanimate object that had correctly warned him in 2 languages. 13. A snowboarder turned skier spent the entire morning proclaiming that balance is universal, which might be true philosophically, but not when switching sports mid-vacation. He faced the slope with the serene arrogance of someone assuming gravity was on his side. The moment he pushed off, he discovered that skis lacked the singular simplicity of a board. His legs separated into a divinely comedic V-shape, propelling him downhill in a posture that suggested both ambition and surrender. His attempt to correct course involved instinctive leaning, which only accelerated the chaos into a symmetrical disaster. He slid to a stop by rotating into a gentle seated position, looking at his skis like they had betrayed him personally. He announced that the snow felt weird today, as if meteorology had conspired against him rather than his own misplaced confidence. 14. A retiree with decades of nostalgia but zero recent practice decided that muscle memory would override physics. He marched up to the slope, announcing he would ease back into it, then immediately headed for an advanced trail because he once skied it in the 80s. Unfortunately, advancements in grooming, equipment, and his own age created a mismatch of expectations. His descent began like a proud reunion tour and quickly devolved into a reunion with every wobble, slip, and startled noise he didn't remember making in his youth. His skis clattered in a rhythm that sounded like a percussion section fighting for survival. By the time he reached the bottom, miraculously upright, he nodded thoughtfully and declared he had verified that the mountain changed, because acknowledging personal rust apparently violated his internal policy manual. 15. A tourist attempting to impress co-workers on a winter retreat decided to ski without goggles for the aesthetic, as though the mountain had been curated for his personal photo shoot. Seconds into his descent, the bitter wind introduced itself to his eyeballs with the enthusiasm of an overzealous salesperson. He squinted, blinked, and tried to maintain composure while his visibility shrank to a blurry snow globe approximation of reality. His turns grew hesitant, then ambitious, then entirely theoretical as he navigated by guesswork. At one point, he attempted to dodge what he believed was a tree but turned out to be a shadow, which did little to help his co-workers, filming from the lift, maintain composure. When he finally coasted to a halt, eyes watering like he had watched a tragic movie, he insisted the run had been refreshing, which is one way to describe involuntary winter exfoliation. 16. A self-proclaimed natural athlete announced he didn't need lessons because skiing is just walking but faster, which is exactly the level of scientific rigor that leads a grown adult to point his skis directly downhill and trust fate like he's renewing a warranty. His run began with an ambitious lunge that suggested confidence, but quickly evolved into a full-body tremor as his legs attempted to negotiate different treaties with the snow. He whizzed past families, instructors, and one very concerned snowman while emitting noises that cannot be traced to any known emotional category. His final maneuver involved a dramatic attempt to slow down by just leaning, which only accelerated him into a majestic sideways skid that deposited him into a soft powder drift like a returning space capsule. Rising with exaggerated calm, he explained to onlookers that he wanted to test terminal velocity, as if the entire disaster had been part of an applied physics curriculum. 17. A tech worker visiting the mountains for the first time became convinced that his VR skiing experience had fully prepared him for real slopes, because nothing screams expertise like mistaking a living mountain for a polygon tutorial. He strapped in with the smugness of someone who has never encountered consequences and launched into a run that immediately proved his headset had lied. He shifted his weight exactly the way the VR demo taught him, which only resulted in a turn so wide it could have encircled a small village. His arms flailed in a desperate attempt to recalibrate reality's graphics engine, and his feet appeared to disconnect from the rest of his decision-making system. Halfway down, he yelled, "Lag!" as if blaming his coordination on poor Wi-Fi coverage. His run ended in a gentle but definitive sit-down landing, where he remained for several seconds, processing the shocking discovery that real snow does not include a reset button or a tutorial pop-up explaining how to stop. 18. A woman dressed impeccably in a couture winter outfit treated the ski slope like a personal runway, which might have been fine if she hadn't mistaken a steep hill for a catwalk extension. She planted her poles with the elegant precision of someone announcing her presence at Fashion Week and glided forward with the serene confidence of a model doing a slow, dramatic turn, until the slope immediately disagreed with her choreography. Her skis picked up speed faster than her facial expression could recalibrate, and she descended with a frantic grace that looked half swan, half shopping cart rolling downhill. Her carefully chosen scarf billowed behind her like a victory flag that had defected mid-battle. She attempted a stop by angling her skis inward, resulting in a sudden seated slide that left a perfect designer imprint in the snow. Standing up with aristocratic dignity, she claimed she wanted to check the fabric's wind resistance, offering perhaps the most elegant excuse ever crafted during a public collapse. 19. A man determined to document his epic journey decided to ski while live streaming, which is how an entire audience watched a beginner slope deliver a firm lesson in humility. He narrated with deep confidence, offering pointers he clearly invented on the spot, while his skis obeyed none of his stated techniques. The moment he tried to adjust the camera angle mid-descent, his balance evaporated like a coupon code at checkout. He began veering left in slow, alarming increments while assuring viewers he was totally in control, prompting the live stream chat to disagree loudly in text form. His attempt to recover involved dramatic pole waving that resembled someone trying to hail a helicopter from the ground. The inevitable fall arrived in a soft cloud of snow that consumed both dignity and microphone. When he finally resurfaced, he proudly announced the live stream had captured authentic content, because nothing strengthens a brand quite like broadcasting one's own downfall to hundreds of strangers. 20. A weekend skier with the posture of an overconfident flamingo decided to try a mogul run after overhearing someone call it bumpy but fun, apparently interpreting that as an open invitation rather than a warning. He lined up at the top with the bravery of someone who had not yet Googled what a mogul actually is. His descent was less skiing and more a dramatic reenactment of someone being lightly tossed down a staircase made of marshmallows and regret. With each bump, his body performed a new and exciting interpretive dance move, while his face alternated between panic and polite disbelief. Skiers around him paused to observe what appeared to be an experimental art performance involving gravity, denial, and cartilage. He eventually bounced into a forgiving pile of snow and emerged claiming the moguls were smaller last time, suggesting his memory had been edited by optimism rather than factual history. 21. A thrill seeker who routinely claimed he had excellent reflexes proved otherwise within 5 seconds of leaving the lift. He stepped off with too much enthusiasm, instantly tangling his skis in a maneuver that resembled two coat hangers fighting. Instead of gliding gracefully away, he embarked on an unplanned circular spin that carried him across the unloading area like a confused carnival ride. The lift operator, who likely witnesses daily existential crises, simply watched as the man rotated 8 full times before finally toppling, in slow motion, into a padded barrier. Undeterred, he proclaimed himself warmed up, as if spinning out like a malfunctioning fidget spinner had been part of his athletic vision. Moments later, he pushed off for his main run with the exact same confidence that had just betrayed him, proving once again that ego doesn't lose stamina, even when its host does. 22. A middle-aged accountant attempting to rekindle youthful adventure energy decided he would ski with minimal equipment to feel connected to the mountain, a poetic idea that ignored the practical value of gear designed by experts. He left his helmet in the lodge, unzipped his jacket halfway for aesthetic wind effects, and refused gloves because they mess with the feeling. The mountain, moved by none of this, immediately subjected him to a gust that froze every exposed finger into tiny monuments of bad planning. His run became a stiff-limbed descent in which he clenched his arms to his sides like a cold rotisserie chicken trying to stay aerodynamic. His eyes teared up from wind exposure while his hair whipped dramatically, achieving the exact look of someone who had underestimated winter and was now negotiating with hypothermia. Upon reaching the bottom, shivering intensely, he insisted he had felt spiritually awakened, though his expression suggested spiritual frostbite. 23. A man attempting to impress a group of teenagers by showing them how it's done immediately demonstrated how it is absolutely not done. He pushed off with exaggerated coolness, clearly hoping to be mistaken for a seasoned professional drifting through a winter film montage. Instead, he gained speed at a rate incompatible with his available skill set, transforming his stylish lean into a panicked stumble that sent him careening sideways down the slope, like a rogue desk chair rolling across a slippery floor. The teenagers, instead of being impressed, began filming while offering helpful commentary such as, "Dude, no," which the man could not hear over the sound of his own internal screaming. After an ambitious but doomed attempt to hop a small bump, he toppled into a dramatic tumble that ended in a snow pile. He stood up, brushed himself off, and declared, "Just showing you what not to do," proving that ego is surprisingly durable even when knees are not. 24. A man with a brand new set of top-tier skis assumed the equipment could compensate for his complete lack of technique, the same way some people assume buying an expensive camera instantly makes them a filmmaker. He strutted to the slope with the proud gait of someone who believed technology was about to elevate him into a different species entirely. But the skis, lacking the ability to perform miracles, immediately revealed their disappointment by sliding him sideways before he even reached the incline. Once he began heading downhill, the skis demonstrated every feature except obedience. Sharp turns became unintentional zigzags, aerodynamic control became pure speculation, and precision edging turned into a dramatic snow-spraying display usually reserved for malfunctioning garden sprinklers. When he reached the bottom, he gently patted the skis, claiming he just needed to get used to their power, suggesting he had formed a parasocial relationship with sports equipment that clearly wanted a refund on him. 25. A tourist convinced that skiing was mostly visual intuition decided to skip lessons and instead spent 10 minutes observing others, nodding confidently as if absorbing their skills through osmosis. He pushed off with the posture of someone reenacting a motivational poster, but his intuition apparently forgot to factor in momentum, edge control, and the inconvenient fact that humans do not naturally slide on frozen inclines. His descent evolved into a cautious wobble, followed by an ambitious lean, followed by a near-horizontal panic glide. At one point, he extended both arms like a confused mall mannequin trying to hail a taxi on ice. Another skier politely sidestepped him, prompting him to proclaim, "I meant to give them room," though his expression indicated he had meant no such thing. When he finally met the bottom, mostly upright, he declared himself a quick study, which is technically true if the subject is performing new and exciting mistakes with speed and enthusiasm. 26. A high-energy extrovert decided the mountain needed more hype and began cheering loudly at the top of the slope, flexing his poles overhead and announcing he was ready to send it, despite having never successfully completed a gentle turn. The moment he launched forward, the slope returned his enthusiasm with an acceleration normally reserved for physics demonstrations involving frictionless surfaces. His cheers rapidly transitioned into high-volume vowel sounds, while his skis performed an interpretive dance routine that expressed fear, confusion, and several warranty violations. Other skiers watched as he oscillated between near-upright determination and full diagonal collapse, eventually completing a dramatic sideways skid that concluded with him reclining in the snow like a sunbather in denial. He threw both thumbs up and shouted, "Nailed it!" which, if nothing else, proved his optimism was the only thing in the vicinity with stable footing. 27. A retiree who had recently fallen down a rabbit hole of motivational podcasts declared that his mind could overcome any obstacle, including the steepest hill on the mountain. He stood at the top murmuring affirmations with the intensity of someone preparing to levitate. Unfortunately, gravity had not subscribed to these podcasts and asserted its dominance the moment he began moving. His skis sprinted ahead while the rest of his body lagged several seconds behind, resulting in a shape that looked like he was trying to time travel using posture alone. His attempts to turn involved subtle shifts that the snow graciously ignored. Eventually, he drifted sideways into a gentle roll that deposited him into a soft embankment, leaving him staring at the sky as though reconsidering the entire psychology genre. He rose with calm serenity and stated that the hill had offered him a lesson, which might be the most polite interpretation of a wipeout ever recorded. 28. A determined overachiever with a planner full of color-coded goals approached the mountain with corporate zeal, announcing she was going to master skiing in one afternoon. The slope, having no respect for quarterly objectives, immediately introduced her to the concept of delayed outcomes. Her first run involved her skis parting ways like two teammates resigning mid-season, sending her into a flustered drift that challenged every bullet point on her itinerary. She attempted to regain control with deep, serious breaths, an admirable mindfulness practice that did nothing for her trajectory. After narrowly avoiding a group lesson, she gently collided with a snowbank that embraced her like a soft performance review. Rising with surprising optimism, she informed everyone she would adjust her strategy, proving that some people can repurpose any disaster into an action item. 29. A man convinced that skiing was merely jogging but sideways stepped onto the slope with the optimism of a golden retriever attempting calculus. He bent his knees, pumped his arms, and attempted a rhythmic movement that had absolutely nothing to do with skiing technique and everything to do with misidentifying reality. The moment he picked up speed, running logic abandoned him, leaving him gliding uncontrollably while still pumping his arms like he expected to generate lift. Observers watched in fascinated confusion as he leaned forward to gain momentum, which only accelerated his descent into a wobbling sprint on ice. He ultimately sat down mid-motion, sliding across the snow in a pose that suggested he'd made peace with the universe. When he stopped, he insisted he had been testing an alternative method, which is a polite phrasing for inventing a new winter sport no one asked for. 30. A man who claimed he had studied biomechanics extensively decided he understood skiing better than the instructor teaching his group. He interrupted the lesson several times to explain why the human body naturally optimizes movement, which the instructor tolerated with the hollow-eyed patience of someone who has seen too many spreadsheets masquerading as expertise. When it came time for the group's first run, he pushed off proudly, only to discover that his meticulously theorized form immediately collapsed under the renegade influence of actual terrain. His turns were wide, hesitant, and punctuated by yelps he definitely didn't cover in his research. After a long, chaotic descent, he arrived at the bottom, looking like someone who had questioned gravity and received an itemized rebuttal. With a straight face, he declared the slope biomechanically inefficient, which is one way to blame the environment for not behaving like a lab diagram. 31. A thrill-seeking hobbyist with a helmet covered in stickers from sports he had never successfully performed announced he would end the day with a hero run, a concept he apparently defined as going way too fast without a plan. He positioned himself at the top like an action figure waiting to be launched and propelled forward with gusto that immediately outpaced his stability. His skis rattled with the alarmed chatter of equipment asking to speak to a manager, while his body remained committed to a straight-line descent despite every visual cue suggesting imminent disaster. He attempted to lean into a turn with all the grace of a collapsing ladder, ultimately spinning into a dramatic slide that traced a perfect arc of chaos across the snow. When he finally drifted to a stop, arms splayed like a fallen action movie extra, he laughed breathlessly and declared he'd found his limit. Though, judging by the slope behind him, the limit had found him first. If this was gravity's highlight reel, I'm honestly afraid of the bloopers. Drop your pick for the dumbest wipeout below, because clearly the mountain's not done collecting volunteers.